you want to support families with sleep and you know in your bones that leaving a child of any age to cry alone doesn't sit right, but you also feel uncomfortable with unrealistic promises that say gentle means no crying ever, then this video is for you. Because if you misunderstand crying, you will either override it, aim to avoid it, which is nearly impossible, or feel scared by it. Today we're stepping into one of the most emotionally loaded and often oversimplified topics in infant sleep. Is crying always a sign something is wrong? What does it actually mean? And why is our ethos around crying fundamentally different? Let's unpack it properly. I'm Lindsay, co-founder of the Holistic Sleep Coaching Program, where we train professionals around the world to support families with evidence, empathy, and deep respect for attachment. Crying is one of the biggest sticking points for practitioners entering this field. It's emotional, it's polarizing, and it's often reduced to extremes. But the truth is far more nuanced. Let me introduce you to Chloe. When Chloe was looking to become a sleep coach, she explored a lot of different training options, and what she kept finding didn't sit right. There was a lot of scaremongering in the sleep world, a lot of rigid methods, a lot of language around control. She told us she never liked the idea of controlled crying or cry it out. It just didn't align with her parenting values. But at the time, she genuinely thought that was the only option. Finding the Holistic Sleep Coaching Program was the first time she realised there was an entire community of professionals who didn't operate that way. She described it as my parenting style in a business. Nothing she recommends to families is something she wouldn't do herself. One of the biggest transformations for her wasn't just around crying, it was understanding sleep needs properly. Before training, she had absorbed the mainstream narrative. Every child needs 12-hour nights, fixed nap totals, rigid parameters. When her own child didn't meet those expectations, she felt anxious, like she was getting it wrong. Through training, she realised something incredibly simple but powerful. Human beings are different. Sleep needs vary. Regulation, temperament, development, they all matter. That understanding didn't just change her practice, it changed her confidence. And that shift in understanding crying and sleep together is exactly what we're talking about today. Now, the core question around crying, when professionals talk about crying, the questions usually cluster around 5 core themes. What is crying, biologically and emotionally? Does a responsive, holistic approach mean eliminating crying? Can sleep improve without distress? Is crying with parental support fundamentally different from crying alone? And what makes our interpretation of crying distinct from mainstream sleep training? Let's take these one by one. When was the last time you cried? I bet it wasn't that long ago. All humans cry. In fact, we humans produce 3 types of tears. Basal tears, which lubricate the eye, reflex tears from irritants like dust or onions, and emotional tears. Now, emotional tears are chemically distinct. Research has shown that tears produced in response to different emotional states contain different compositions. If emotional tears are biologically unique, they're not trivial, which brings us to a key principle. Crying is communication. Before spoken language, crying is one way babies and young children express emotion. If we believe in responsive caregiving, we cannot logically dismiss communication. And really, if we wouldn't leave an elderly grandparent alone crying, or our teenager, or our partner, why would we leave a baby or young toddler alone to cry? Now, is all crying bad? Well, bad is a value judgment and it oversimplifies something complex. Children cry from joy, from relief, from overwhelm, from frustration, from connection. When crying is reduced purely to unmet physical need, we ignore its broader emotional function. Mainstream frameworks often imply that once basic needs are met, crying may be safely disregarded. But crying is also proximity seeking, attachment seeking, regulation seeking. Infant crying activates adults for a reason. We're biologically wired to respond, and optimal development is shaped not just by physical safety but by attuned emotional responsiveness. So does holistic sleep coaching mean no crying? Well, we need a better question than that. Does holistic sleep coaching mean responding to communication? Yes. Does it mean guaranteeing no crying ever? No, because children experience emotion. Emotion sometimes involves tears. Our work is not about eliminating emotion, it's about responding to it with intelligence and compassion. Guaranteeing no crying ever would require guaranteeing that children never feel frustration, disappointment, confusion, or transition stress. That's not realistic. What is realistic is educating parents so they feel confident responding to communication. So can we improve sleep without distress? Well, very often, yes. One of the advantages of a holistic whole child approach is that we explore sleep needs and timing, regulation, sensory inputs, connection and emotional scaffolding, feeding, nutrition, development, play and activity, and family capacity. Sometimes sleep challenges are not behavioural at all. They're expectation mismatches. When those mismatches are corrected, sleep often improves without any emotional upheaval. This is where Chloe's transformation around understanding sleep needs becomes so relevant. If a child is wired differently and we try to fit them into a generic template, anxiety escalates. When understanding increases, pressure decreases, and sleep often follows. However, if parents are changing a response that has become unsustainable, a child may have feelings about that. That could involve crying. Parenting, including nighttime parenting, involves loving boundaries, but boundaries are not abandonment. Now, this is where nuance matters most. There is no direct research comparing crying in arms versus crying alone in a cot, but attachment theory and affect regulation research give us a framework. Imagine two scenarios. In one, a child is being held, the parent is stroking their back, saying, "I'm here, I know this is hard," adjusting their approach moment by moment. That's attunement. In another scenario, the child is alone and receives no response. Both children are expressing emotion, only one is having that communication of their emotion. Holding loving limits while remaining present is fundamentally different from withdrawing responsiveness. Children should not be expected to manage overwhelming emotion alone. So what makes us different? Well, we don't categorize crying into valid and invalid. We do not rank pain above frustration in terms of worthiness of response and empathy. We do not recommend leaving children of any age to cry alone. And we do not promise parents that emotion will never arise. Our difference lies in interpretation and consistency of response. Crying is communication, attachment behaviour, emotional processing, a nervous system signal. Parents are the experts on their children. Our role is to empower them with knowledge, not override their instincts. So is crying always a sign something is wrong? Not necessarily, but is it always a sign something is being communicated? Absolutely. And communication deserves to be heard. Now, if you're drawn to this field, but you know that nuance matters, if you want to support families without rigid extremes, and if you value an approach that aligns with your parenting values, like Chloe described, then the Holistic Sleep Coaching Program may be the right next step for you. Click the link below to book a free call with our team. And if this conversation sparked something for you, watch our other video, Why Gentle Isn't Enough, the difference between different types of sleep support, because not all gentle approaches are created equal.